I believe God has given us one last window of opportunity.
We are at a war footing and time is short. The king is coming. I have no idea when we're going to get taken out.
We need to be Bereans. We need to be careful students of history and the scripture.
See, scholars aren't interested in information to help them make a decision today. They're looking for confirmation of others to justify an opinion they already have.
The Bible is the ultimate authority for us as Christians in everything we believe.
Our reaction to uncertain times reveals both our fear and our faith.
Now, for the first time in history, America has turned its back on the plight of Israel.
Well, welcome again to the Executive Briefing Room here at the River Lodge in Reparoa, New Zealand. I'm here with Dr. Chuck Missler. Hello, Chuck, welcome to another Q&A session.
I look forward to these. This is great.
Well, Chuck, before we get into our questions that have come in, I want to take a few moments to talk about something that's really fundamental. We've talked a lot about the fact that people are sensing the sense that we're sailing into uncharted and stormy waters. They're concerned. There's a lot of confusion going on, and really, it's one of those things that when you've addressed this, you've talked about two basic challenges that are there for people. And when you make a presentation about the Institute, tell us a little bit about those challenges.
Oh, the two basic challenges?
Yeah.
Well, the more you know about what the Bible says, and the more you know what's going on, the more you see the convergence. So that means you got to do two things. You got to find out, first of all, what the Bible really says, not what someone said it says.
Yes.
But dig out for you. You can't delegate that. You got to do that for yourself. And having done that, though, then you got the other part is find out what's really going on. That's not easy today. because I think we're really being plunged into what many people are calling the age of deceit. You certainly can't believe the media, and you can't find decent news to find what's really going on. Everybody's got an edge or something, and so it's a challenge.
Now, one of the things, I mean, you've been teaching the Bible for more than a couple of years.
More than we want to admit to.
And as a result, you've produced a lot of material, expository, that is speaking verse by verse, chapter by chapter through the whole Bible. You've covered more than...
That's a key thing. It's expositional.
Yes.
As the entire Bible.
Yes.
It's not topical. It's the whole thing, the whole package.
And you've also done about 30 or 40 topicals on strategic issues and things. And over time, it was a little over 10 years ago, about 11 years ago or so, that you founded the Koinonia Institute, which said, wow, we have all of this material. Let's consolidate that and make it available in a packaged way where people can be prepared. Tell us a little bit about the Institute.
People have discovered that there's a benefit to being in something that has a program to it. It has a direction. It's not just a drift. You're actually following a program, a package. And so that's how we really created divided up into 3 parts. The Berean, the Word of God, which is above everything else. But there's another aspect called what we call Issachar, which is what's going on today, the current perspective. And then the result of both of those should be action, where the shoe leather meets the road.
Right.
So to speak.
And we sort of defined some levels just simply as trail mark is a bronze medallion kind of achievement is some of the basic overview of the Bible.
The idea was that we don't specialize in any one of those 3, but when you achieve a level of competence in each of the 3, we call it, we issue a bronze, then subsequently a silver or gold as you progress. But again, keeping all 3 in a balance. That's the idea.
Yes. And so when we look at the various things from the end time scenario, which is Berean-related stuff, strategic trends, and then also those come down to tactical perspectives, really talk about the whole aspect of the 3 legs of our stool in terms of what we're teaching. Now, the real core of that, the foundation, we really consider our flagship in one sense, is the Learn the Bible in 24-hour.
We've determined very early that even Christians don't really know their Bible. And so we became obsessed with this deficiency of biblical understanding, not only in the pews, but in the pulpits. And to try to raise our real goal, the thing that's been consistent all through the years, is our focus on trying to repair what I call our biblical illiteracy.
Right.
And so that's why the Learn the Bible in 24 hours is sort of what become our flagship, our core piece.
Yes, and it's really foundational to everything we built the Institute on, but we feel so strong about this that we've taken it another step. And I want to take a few moments with our viewers.
It's an adverb.
Strongly, yes, that's strongly. And that is, within the Koinonia Institute, we're starting something which are virtual small groups. And for those who have been through our bronze program, that means they have already been through Learn the Bible in 24 hours, our Issachar and our Koinonos classes to the bronze level. They can become a KI small group leader if they satisfy the requirements. And they can find out about that by just simply looking at the website kileader.info. Let's take a moment and we'll just run a clip at this point to just give you a little more insight.
Well, welcome to our excursion called Learn the Bible in 24 Hours. You know, they say no person's education is complete if they do not know their Bible. And one of the things we need to do is repair our own illiteracy about the Bible and to assist those around us to really understand how far God has gone on our behalf.
Well, that just gives a better video way of looking at what we're doing. But the idea of the small group initiative that we've launched, and we're launching it officially today, is that we're looking for those who have been through that program, an opportunity for them to take that information to their circle of friends, within their church, within a small group, within the neighborhood, and to become a KI leader, and take those people through the 24 sessions of Learn the Bible in 24 hours. And so we're providing a special incentive to those people. Try to become reproducers yourself. The second thing is, if you have not been through that material and you'd like to become a KI small group member, there's a number of ways to do that. But one, of course, is if you are already associated with somebody who has been through our Koinonia Institute program, you can join up with them. They can lead the group, and you can get access to all 24 sessions, all the quizzes, all the discussion questions, all the tools and notes, all of it available for $49.95 rather than the normal, if you did it in 6 months, the normal $150. The idea is that we feel now is the time to repair that biblical illiteracy. And we as a ministry are really putting all of our effort into this at the moment. Really is the primary push. In fact, I'm taking a personal challenge here in that I'm going to create my own online group. If you are one of those that you don't know somebody who's been through Koinonia Institute or haven't been invited to join another one, you can join me personally. And I'm going to lead a group, and here's what you do. You go to kigroups.info, and there's a web page there that'll ask you to put in a small group enrollment code that entitles you to this incredible discount, which is about 2/3 off the normal price for taking that class. That will give you access to all of the videos associated with Learn the Bible in 24 hours, all the quizzes, all the exams, the discussion questions, and of course the interactive forum. And I'll be the teacher assistant in those classes. And I'd love to see that just fill up with lots of people chatting back and forth about the Bible as we go through this adventure over the next half a year. And so I encourage you to do that. We're going to officially start the class. You want to join it now, but we'll start the session so that we're all working at the same timeline on September the 4th. So you have a couple of weeks, but you need to go online and get registered now. And we'll be monitoring that to make sure the class doesn't get too big. But if you want to be in the class that I will be the teaching instructor, and interface with me during this experience, I encourage you to go there and to use that product code that we've shown on the screen there, which is RonMatt 081616SG. And I'll break the code for you. It was given to me on August 16th, 2016. It's how that number came about. It's not a random number generator. But so I want you to take that opportunity if you can and join us as we begin to go through that. And we'll, in subsequent weeks, as we go through each of the hours, we'll probably take a little bit of our Q&A time to deal publicly with what's going on in the classroom. So you'll want to join that class if you at all can. Chuck, I want to go on to one other aspect, and that is when we look at these three legs of our of the Koinonia Institute, the Berean, the Issachar, and the Koinos, we really think that covers a lot of bases. It really gives a round education, but that gives us the sense of the strategic perspectives.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We've discovered that the tools are different in each one. In other words, Berean is just to learn the Word of God. That's pretty straightforward. It preempts everything else. But we also learned that what we call the Issachar, the current events focus, is a totally different set of resources. And that was revealing to us to realize that they're complementary. They're different, and you need them both. But they are only useless except to the extent they result in actual action, commitment, personal involvement. That's what we call the koinonos thing, the more tactical aspects of it. And so that's where we try to unravel those semantics because they get confused.
Yes, yes. Now, and of course that plays well into our conference that's coming up in October, Strategic Perspectives. It's the 27th through the 29th in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, at the Coeur d'Alene resort there. As we've said in the past, it is something that has limited seating. When we look at the lineup of the 12 speakers that will be there, of course, you'll be the speaker that ends up closing the conference, and you've got some special things the Lord's put on your heart to be able to share there. William Federer is a well-known journalist in the United States, has the American Minute. Paul McGuire is a teacher on prophecy. Joel Richardson, we've had him many times. He's been a real resource for us, hasn't he?
Oh, he's a resource, and how, yes.
And he has probably the best insight, I think, in the Islamic community and a lot of the strategic issues in the Middle East. Joseph Farah is another individual that has been to all 11 of our conferences, and he's the chairman of WorldNet Daily, and characterized WorldNet Daily for us.
Yeah, he's devoted his life that the purpose of the press is to ride herd on the government, and that critical approach, he's really devoted his life to it, and WorldNet Daily is the fruits of all of that. So we're proud to be associated with him.
Right. We have Steve Carroll, who is a newcomer to our conference, but he's an individual who has been associated with a person that you've known for years, Josh McDowell, involved in a lot of apologetics. Scott Carroll brings some interesting expertise in that he's head of an organization that focuses on ancient New Testament manuscripts. In fact, I believe it's true that he has one of the largest private collections of ancient New Testament manuscripts, which is very important when we talk about the authority of the New Testament. And so he's going to be bringing that to us. We have L.A. Marzulli. He's a repeat speaker. He's somebody who will bring in the wow factor in terms of some of his Nephilim and UFO stuff.
Right.
That's Bill Salas, a guy who really received the call to ministry by coming to one of your home Bible studies, speaking in small groups.
But he's also the one that really has led the charge down Psalm 83 and all of that really tracks back to his discoveries.
Correct. We have Bob Cornuke, of course, no stranger to this ministry. You've partnered with him on many of his adventures, and
very much so.
And he's a guy who's not afraid to put his pickaxe into some pretty tough stuff.
He's challenged some of the most sacred traditions in the Jewish community.
Right.
They're doing an excellent job.
Right. William Welty, of course, member of our board, chairman of the International Standard Version Bible, really quite a biblical scholar. We look to him.
Exegesis.
Yes, that's right. I'll skip over that one guy, Ron Mattson. I think they've heard enough of him. We have our last guy that we've mentioned there is Jay Siegert. He's really a clever guy,
By the way,
communicator.
I'm not going to let you get away with that, because I know of no one that is more capable and competent in the area of Christian doctrine, who actually has been a pastor for 25 years. He's been there and back on these complicated, non-trivial doctrinal disputes through the years. So I value his. That's
the Ron Mattson guy.
That's the Ron Mattson guy. Absolutely.
All right. That's what the proverb says. That don't speak well of yourself. Let somebody else do that. Jay Siegert, an expert in the area of creation. And so we have a well-rounded group there that'll hit lots of strategic issues. And so you want to make sure that you take advantage of the offers that are out there. I did look at the website before we came on today, notice that some of the aspects of the conference are already being sold out. So if you want to attend, you're going to need to make those decisions fairly soon, because the places are filling up, especially the mealtime Q&A sessions. Those are really favorites. People love the idea of being in an intimate environment and asking questions.
It's interesting as I look over these 12 people, each one of these in a unique way is probably the leader in that unique topic. You know, if you talk exegesis, exegetical analysis, Welty's name surfaces. And if you look, so as you take each one of those areas, in that area, the one that's clearly the head and shoulder leader is the person there featured.
Yes.
So they've done a good job in balancing the team here, my friend.
Yeah, good. Well, it's exciting. It's our 11th conference there in Coeur d'Alene, and we're very excited about not only the group of teachers, but the timing of all of this. Chuck, we live in a time where we began the broadcast by saying people are really wondering what to do. They certainly had plenty of people telling us lots of bad news, They want to know what to do. And this conference and subsequent teachings from here, we want to really help people understand. I know God's placed on your heart a very specific message that you want to bring, which really brings it all back to the centrality.
We clearly are moving to a time of anybody that subscribes to competent advisory newsletters is well aware of the fact that the editors of those, all of them, have been screaming for more than a year or two now that there is a huge, huge disruption overdue. And most people the question really is one of timing, but the emergence of our national elections in the U.S. in November clearly are pivotal. And none of the experts can even second guess what's really going to happen, but there is that perturbation is coming, and to be prepared for that makes sense for lots of reasons. So the timing here is crucial. People sense it, some with sophistication, some just instinctively, but clearly we're facing a very, very uncertain time. Right. And this is our response to those uncertain times.
Absolutely right. And of course, if you can't be there at the conference with us in person, of course, if you go to the site khouse.org, you can sign up for one of our streaming passes, which gives you the unique capability of not only being able to watch all of the sessions during the conference live, but also you have 30 days to watch the video on demand for you to be able to share it with others and be able to review the information again. And you can do that by simply visiting khouse.org. So with all of that, the preliminaries, let's get to a question that actually I asked in last week's session, and I don't think, because it came at the end and we were working against the clock, so to speak, we didn't really give it the time that we should have. And so I want to come to this question by Christina, where she says, I have a question with respect to hate crime law. Once the law is instituted, it permits the prosecution against the hate crime committed on the basis of a person's protected characteristics such as race, religion, sexual orientations, etc. Basically, we're not allowed to talk about Islam or homosexuality. What do you view about, what's your view about hate crimes, Chuck?
Very simply, they're satanic. The whole concept of a hate crime twisted around. The person that's announcing it as a hate crime is got Satan behind him, because every one of them, so-called hate crimes, are issues that attack something that Satan is anxious to undo, attacking the family. The whole notion that gender is a matter of choice. This foolishness is promoted by, they're literally, when you recognize the source of that and what the agenda of that is, they're satanic. And to call them hate crimes dignifies them, when in fact they're attempts to prohibit you from things you should be talking about and should be dealing with. The idea of sexual orientation is not something you should be teaching your kids incorrectly about. And so we're not being allowed to talk about Islam. That's what Islam would prefer, us not talking about it. Truth of the matter is, almost everything you've heard about Islam is a lie. It's not only it's not a peaceful religion. It's neither peaceful nor a religion, either one. It's an agenda for global conquest. And so we need to get the truth of this out in front, not hide it behind the veil of so-called hate crimes.
Right. And of course, you're not advocating the fact that if someone is doing something that is motivated by hate, of course, that should be illegal.
To imply that it's motivated by hate itself is to prejudice what's coming.
Correct. We have laws that deal with someone who defames someone.
Well, you talk about which laws and who's promoting it and who's enforcing it. Let's be clear about that. And so it's a form of twisting and nonsense.
And silencing the ability to express your disapproval. Yes. Calling that a hate crime, yes, we would say is wrong.
And we disapprove of it.
Yes, we disapprove of their hateful way of not allowing us to speak our disapproval. I think that should be our right, so long as we do that in a manner that respects the laws. we can at least express our opinion
And,
with regards to it.
and fulfilling the hate laws will fulfill Satan's agenda.
Yes.
Which
Because
is
it just silences everybody. You can't say anything about that because you make somebody fearful, and then all of a sudden you have the thought police running around trying to enforce a way of living and acting.
Denial freedom of speech, yeah.
Which is denying it. All right. Well, Christina, we took a little more time with that. It's a great question, and it's going to become an increasingly sensitive issue, I think. It's going to be used as a tool by governments to silence opposition to unbiblical behavior. And that's, in a nutshell, that's our biggest concern, isn't it? All right. Let's move on to the next question. Cindy writes, if in the book of Jude, the reference to Enoch is not the Enoch of the book of Enoch, then who is the Enoch that wrote the book of Enoch? Also,
let's take one at a time.
All
Okay.
All right.
First of all, the book of Enoch is a compilation of rabbinical beliefs in about the 2nd century before Christ. So it's just a collection that they've adopted that as a label. It wasn't written by Enoch. That's what it calls itself, the book of Enoch. But it's masquerading under a false label in that sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a very important document because it codifies what rabbis believed, apparently, in the 2nd century, 2nd century before Christ. And so in that sense, it's a useful document for scholars. But don't assume that it's inspired. Don't assume that it was a guy by a real Enoch of any kind. So that's just, a masquerade, if you will, a charade. But
the question, though, is Jude makes reference to, as Enoch said, and he makes a reference, which that quote is also in the book of Enoch. So would he be quoting some other source, or was it oral tradition?
They both are quoting a third source. So the fact that it quotes that doesn't justify the quote that's coming. That's an easy trap to fall into.
Right.
Two different sources can be quoting a third source that's been lost.
Right.
But that doesn't authenticate either one of the two ones that are quoting it.
Right, right. And then, of course, she brings up the same sort of thing. Also, there are references to the book of Jasher. I'd like to know the same thing. In the Old Testament, it speaks about such and such was written in the book of Jasher, and we don't have a book of Jasher.
There are things around that masquerade as if they were, but that doesn't mean they're authentic.
Correct. All right, let's move on to a question from Robert. He says, please explain why belief in extraterrestrial life, be it either conscious or unconscious, animal or plant, is a rejection of Jesus Christ. This idea of extraterrestrial life, somewhere living on a planet, somewhere else, why is that a rejection?
Well, it turns out to be a denial of the incarnation of Christ. Most, even Christians, fail, in my opinion, they fail to fully understand the universality of what that incarnation claims. The fact that the Creator himself entered his creation and identified himself with the human life is a staggering discovery. And it's interesting, see, the astrobiologists, people who like to talk about life outside the planet Earth, they've got a problem because science is the study of evidence. And they haven't found any evidence to study.
Yeah, exactly.
They keep looking for it, but don't confuse wishful thinking with evidence. The fact that despite intensive funds and resources aimed at searching for extraterrestrial, they haven't found any. That in itself is a fascinating data point. And what you begin to realize when you think it through is the incarnation of Christ is a rebuttal of that. In other words, that's consistent because there is no life ever observed outside the planet Earth. And the incarnation of Christ is the biblical refutation of that. To even search for extraterrestrial life turns out to be a rebuttal of the very famous Drake formula, which mathematically demonstrates how absurd, literally by legal definition absurd, that even the search for that is. Because there are numerous ratios that if they vary by 1 part in a million, they're impossible. And there's not one of those, there's over 140 of those.
Wow.
So that becomes a self-establishing definition of what a miracle is. There is, the fact that there is no legitimate, real evidence, speculations, yes, but no evidence of a life outside the planet Earth, should give us pause to realize that that's an underscoring of the uniqueness of the incarnation of Christ.
Wow.
And many of us, me included, as a biblically oriented guy, throughout my, I had failed to really appreciate how the incarnation of Christ is an apologetic for the reality that we're experiencing. And we always think of the incarnation in soteriological things, because that's how we think it impacts us as personally. Set that aside and realize the entire creation is groaning to be released from entropy. And so once you realize that, you suddenly realize that the incarnation of Christ is a scientific apologetic of a very different kind, far greater scope than simply our own personal redemption. That is the frame of reference we usually refer to it as.
Right.
And that's one reason I'm stunned. I go back and look at some of the things we wrote. We published a thing called The Fulcrum of the Universe, talking about Isaiah 53. It's staggering to see these 12 verses, Isaiah 53, impact not just our salvation, but the entire creation itself. It's the fulcrum of the entire universe. Right. It's staggering.
Amazing, because it is the sense that all creation is subject to futility because of the sin of man, and it will experience, in a sense, redemption as a result of the redemption of man.
Yeah.
And it's incredible, absolutely incredible. Steve asked this question. He says, does John chapter 5, verses 28 and 29 refer to the rapture or Jesus' second coming? And I'll read it. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth, and those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those that have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. So what are your thoughts with regards to that?
They all will participate, but not in the same one. In other words, this isn't all unified. It comes in segments, and that's the part that gets us confused. Because there are those that will be done good and those that haven't, and they don't have the same destinies, nor do they necessarily happen at the same time. There will be a time when it's all done, yes, but it comes in pieces. And that's the part that causes us confusion.
Well, here's an example, I think, of what we've referred to as single verse theology, in terms of you pick a verse that has a particular, it articulates something in a particular way, and you make that the foundation stone, rather than, as Paul said to the Ephesian elders, that I have delivered to you the whole counsel of God. All doctrine, especially with regards to things that are yet future, really need the sense of bringing to bear all the scriptures that deal with the subject, so that you're not just simply speaking to this alone.
Yeah,
there is different events at different times.
That's what makes the study of eschatology, the study of the end times, so difficult, and why it's avoided by so many pastors, because it places a burden on the expositor to have in grasp the whole counsel of God, not just a piece or two.
Yes.
Because the whole thing has to fit together. And that's a challenge. And that's one reason that eschatology is such a challenging area of study, because it imposes the requirement to have the whole thing in view. Mm-hmm. Taking a piece or two out of context is an invitation to confusion.
Yes, and interestingly enough, when I've taught on this, I refer to the experience of Jesus in Capernaum, where he goes in and opens up the scroll of Isaiah, and he begins to, to read through this passage about these messianic declarations. And it says, and he stops midpoint, closes the book and sits down and says, and this is fulfilled in your hearing. And I like to refer to that as there is prophetic punctuation which only the Lord can bring about. And we need to recognize, because it's actually speaking of two comings there, but he's the one who divides it.
But he's a dispensationalist, and people don't like that term, but that's exactly what
he does, because he says.
Stops at a comma. That comma has lasted 2,000 years.
Yes.
But he himself has selected those 12 verses and focused on it, and to distinguish them from the rest. Not that the rest won't happen, but
A different timeline.
That's in Luke 4 for those that are trying to find out where it is. Yeah.
And you have the same thing in terms of the use of idioms like the day of the Lord being a season in some instances. Some would like to make it be the last day, the day of wrath, and so on and so forth. You need all of those types of things need to be put into a consolidated view, especially when it deals with prophecy. You can't discount verses that don't go along with your theology here. And here's a good example. The truth of the matter is, the answer to this is, it references both the rapture with the Thessalonian declaration of the resurrection of the believers and the catching away of the church, and then the resurrection of the unrighteous, that will take place before the great white throne judgment. And so they're both being referenced there. All right. Jenny from Colorado writes, Chuck, you have mentioned Barry Setterfield a few weeks ago that he said that things are to take place during the tribulation periods are very close, so that means the rapture is even closer. You keep mentioning this in the Q&A show, but I wish you would share what those things are. And so give us a few ideas. You've made a reference to some stuff you've read and heard from Barry.
Barry highlights this to his credit. We know that there are certain things that occur after the harpazo, after the what we call the rapture, or the Greek term is harpazo, but that event is a prerequisite condition to the Antichrist being revealed. So in other words, the Antichrist cannot be revealed until after the harpazo. Well, if that's the case, and if we see that there are preparations for the Antichrist apparently to be surfacing, that's an indication that the harpazo is even closer. And so it's an interesting approach, since we know a lot about the individual pieces. By focusing on a piece that we know is subsequent is a way to limit how far away the harpazo might be. It can't be that far away is the point.
Right.
And I think Setterfield is the one that has emphasized that so skillfully, I believe.
Yes.
And so but the thing that the most important New Testament eschatological passage is 2 Thessalonians 2. To understand it was a forgery and written in response to a forgery by Paul. But in that he points out, he highlights the fact that the harpazo is a prerequisite condition to the Antichrist's revelation.
Right.
Well, if you have reason to suspect that the Antichrist revelation is getting very close, that means the harpazo is even closer. That's all.
And certainly it was, again, probably 4 or 5 sessions ago, when there was the failed coup in Turkey, and we talked about President Erdogan and his survival, and then the subsequent police state, and how he's gone from strength to strength there, and how also at the same time Turkey is among the names that are mentioned a lot in end times prophecy. And so as we see that pot boiling there in Turkey, we're saying that's an indication possibly that if that's preparing for a leader and possibly an enforcement of a covenant with Israel, which is what triggers the 70th week of Daniel, whatever that is. A lot of speculation as to what that covenant is that's being enforced, but nonetheless, some believe that Turkey might be involved in that to some degree, and so on and so forth. And that's the kinds of events that we're looking at, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. I think people who are watching this tend to be watching Turkey very carefully. And Turkey has shifted to an elected official, even though he's still a dominant person. And is Erdogan the guy, or is it his replacement that's getting prepared? We don't know. But that cauldron is the one that most people who are knowledgeable in this area are watching the events of Turkey as an indicator of that pot boiling over.
Correct.
And so that all implies that if all that's true, then the harpazo is closer than we can imagine.
That's right. And again, we should underscore in all fairness that we because we take the view, you and I and a number of other teachers take the view of a pre-70th week of Daniel harpazo, we would take that view. Now, if you hold a post-tribulation harpazo or a mid-trib or mid-wrath or whatever,
you got some other problems that we can talk about.
Right, and those are, and they have their own sense of predecessors and successor
It's
events.
the thing that kills most of those other views is the doctrine of imminence.
Yes.
And if you acknowledge what we call the doctrine of imminence, that it could happen at any moment, that eliminates those things that have to happen first, normally.
Yes.
And that's why Setterfield's analysis here, I think, is a useful one to recognize the differences there. But in any case, what it all argues for is that it's close.
Yes.
Closer than we probably can imagine.
Yeah, and the so what question from our standpoint for our viewers is, we're not saying that we know everything emphatically, but the Bible, Jesus tells us when these things begin to take place, look up, for your redemption draws nigh. So that's really the so what question for us should be, let's get about our Master's business and
well,
get
we're
the
talking
gospel
about
out.
we're talking about commands here.
Yes.
And Jesus gave us a command to look up at that
Yes.
time. But he's also given us a command that we don't prepare for. He says, be not deceived.
Yes.
That's not a suggestion, it's a command. How do you not be deceived? And there are some tools that you can derive from the scriptures to keep yourself from being deceived. And we've aligned a few of those in our studies. Number one, being precise in the use of your terms, and to be careful about that kind of thing. And so forth. We could go into all that. It's a whole other thing. But the point is, recognize that there are a bag of tools that one can assemble to keep from being deceived.
Yes.
And we should focus more attention on that.
Absolutely. Lance asked this question: how can we differentiate when the Bible uses worldwide terminology as to when it means the known world at the time and the whole world in mononymity? In other words, when it says, for example, and Caesar said, let the whole world be taxed. Obviously, he didn't have the ability to tax Central America or China at that point. He's asking the question, how do you know? Is there a way to find when the Bible is using this term and let the whole world will be under the sway of the Antichrist, or the whole world needs to be taxed, or whatever? How do we know that means whole world in its modern sense? Every person on every continent, on every island.
I don't know how to answer his question. I don't know what he means by the whole world.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. When biblically, when it says
speaking?
the whole world.
Who's speaking? If it's Caesar speaking, we know who he's talking about.
Right. It's Caesar speaking. When he uses the term whole world, he's speaking of the whole world of the Roman Empire. Because obviously he couldn't tax the Parthian Empire or
exactly right.
or the Qin Empire in China or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's the definition, then, isn't it? Really, that it depends on who's issuing the command when it says the whole world. When God says whole world, he means
the whole world.
The whole world. That's right. Okay. Elsie from YouTube writes this: do you believe there are humans today that have tainted DNA from angel Nephilim sources? If so, what does that mean for their possible redemption? So let's take that as two parts. We deal with this issue in Genesis of this strange passage of the B'nai Elohim, these God-created beings that come down and procreate with the daughters of man. And
those are fallen angels, and they were specifically incarcerated for a future release.
Correct.
Yes.
And they create the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And then it says, but it's not only them, but also afterward. And that's referring, of course, to the Anakim and all of that would have been in Israel at the time of the Exodus.
Goliath was an Anakim.
Is a good example. Mm-hmm. And so her question is, okay, so now we don't have a flood to wipe this out. Is this really a DNA issue? And if so, are there people running around on the planet today with Nephilim DNA? And if so, can they be saved?
Number one, I have no idea. Let's get that out of the way. We don't know. But at the same time, anyone that is, what does it mean for their redemption? Anyone redeemed is redeemed by the Lord Jesus Christ. He's the only one that can, the only one that does. All of us that are redeemed through him, not through us, but through him. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what that means. Are there some Nephilim running around? I have no idea. L.A. Marzulli and others have.
I was going to say, LA, come to the conference. I'm sure LA has L.A. Marzulli. This is the area that he traffics in. But I would offer at this point, though, Chuck, this is sort of a genre of questions that people, because of the internet, the appliances we have, you can research anything you want. But there's a danger to that, in that we can find ourselves doing analysis in areas where all we're going to get is supposition, is conjecture. And trying to make that supposition into something that's factual that then transitions into an action plan for ourselves really can cause a lot of trouble, can't it?
And I think you can segue this into the Mandela effect if you really want to.
Well, exactly. There's a great example. It'll get us into trouble again there. But yes, the idea is that just because the question can be asked, I'm not sure that it deserves our attention to spend a lot of time on it.
Good point. Exactly right. Building speculations on speculations is building on quicksand. And we need, I think it's very important to distinguish what's a fact from a speculation. And there's so much floating around our airwaves that are really speculations or speculations about speculations that you're really dealing in a non-definable area in the first place.
Yes.
And but one of the ways you can cut through that is from the Word of God.
Yes. Well, it's like the proverbial medieval debate, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Now, we may use that.
Yeah, one if it's large enough, right?
Or a small enough pin. But the point of the matter is, it's a discussion that might have been interesting for theologians to discuss, but at the end of the day, if it's not a doctrine or a concept that brings you closer to the Lord, probably best to leave it in the box of interesting things to consider. And I'm not saying that LC shouldn't ask these. These are good questions. People are asking these questions, and I think they're fair. But I think we need to probably encourage our viewers to engage in the stuff that really matters. God is a God who's a redeemer. He's gracious. And he's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And so, and there is no other way than through Jesus Christ.
But one of the things that I'm convinced of, and that's why William Elton, I came out with the book, I, Jesus, is to look at the claims of Jesus, his own words. And it's a shock to discover, and I think even Christians need to rediscover who Jesus really is.
Yes.
That is a concept that is underestimated by most people. Even Christians have yet to really discover who he is.
Yeah.
And the fact that his actions impact not just all of us, but the entire creation itself. And we need to re-examine, refocus. And that's what we should be realigning our priorities about, is on the person of Jesus Christ.
Yes, right. Tom from San Diego writes, is the definition of sin strictly any violation of the Ten Commandments, or is it anything that is not holy? What's the
Whatsoever
definition?
is not of faith is sin.
Wow, good definition.
So I wouldn't limit it to the Ten Commandments, even though they are more than we can deal with.
Yeah.
But if you set them aside, there's more to face. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin.
Yes, in a nice big general.
His words.
Yes, yes. And to break any of the commandments, which the fundamental Jews would tell you there's 613 that are codified in the Tanakh, the Old Testament.
The 614th is the catch one.
Yes, that's right. At any rate, it's all sin.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Stuart from Darwin, Australia says, Revelation 3:16, Jesus is sick of lukewarm Christianity.
Literally, he's going to puke.
He says, how would we become hot Christians so as not to be spat out? Can you provide some examples of how it can be hot? Now, before we get into that, I want to read that passage, because I think oftentimes questions like this are answered within the context of the text. So I'll read that passage, Revelation 3:15 and 16. He says, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish that you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and have neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. And so his question is, how do we avoid that? And I won't go on here at this point. I've got some other things we can present. But what would be the normal counsel you'd give to somebody who would be concerned that they've become lukewarm as a Christian? What would be your encouragement to them?
To re-examine your priorities. He should be the head of everything. Cold, hot is not the issue. Is, where are you with respect to the commands he's given us? And so, setting aside for the moment what infers here from cold or hot, either one is better than where you're at.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah. You're neither cold nor hot, and that's unacceptable.
Yes.
You can't be indifferent to the person of Jesus Christ. That's really the net of it. That's to me what it says.
Yes, absolutely. And again, interesting within the context, when you go on to verse 17 and 18, here is where John is going to define for us what it means to be lukewarm. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. So that's the definition of being lukewarm. When you are self-sufficient, you become the rich young ruler in that sense. It says, I counsel you to buy for me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. And so, how do you avoid this is by doing verse 18, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Is get out of this self-sufficiency mode and get into a mode where you're depending upon the Lord.
The word depend, trust. The interesting thing is that he seems to demand or require our trusting him, not trusting ourselves, trusting him. And so all these questions beg the question of, who are you trusting? In my case, I'm not trusting me, for heaven's sakes. I don't know if so, I'll screw it up.
Yes.
I trust him.
Yes.
And I place my trust in him. And because I can be secure there.
Absolutely. Well, let me pass on to something else. So when I taught through Revelation, I did some study about that in terms of its location. And there on the screen you can see Laodicea sits between two cities, Colossae and Hierapolis. And it's interesting that Hierapolis is the location of a lot of hot springs, like where we live here in New Zealand. We're in the thermal wonderland of the North Island, and there are a lot of these natural hot springs. And of course, you can go to Hierapolis even today and enjoy the natural mineral water that's there. Colossae, which means massive or colossus, had a lot of beautiful waterfalls and cold water, and so it was the source of a lot of cold water. Laodicea was a place where they had no natural hot water springs nor cold water springs, so they had to pipe everything in, and you can see these pipes that are still there. And the idea was that Jesus is using was the Laodicean people had a problem. Their source of cold water, by the time it left Colossae, by the time it arrived in Laodicea, had turned warm. And its source of hot water from Hierapolis had also gone from hot water to warm water. So by the time it reaches Laodicea, it's gotten lukewarm. The downside of lukewarm is that it allows the growth of bacteria. And it's sort of like leaven in that sense, in that it allows the growth of something that's harmful. And so the water supply in Laodicea was made putrid by the fact that it was lukewarm. In the same way in which Jesus would say, avoid the leaven of the Pharisees, it leavens the whole lump. The idea here for the Laodiceans that Jesus is warning is they've allowed themselves to take something that is a sort of leaven and expose themselves to not a pure source. It's also interesting to note even the name Laodicea means Leo are the people, Dicea means
rule of the people.
And so it's the rule of the people, which is always a bad situation when you consider that their lukewarmness was because they said, I'm good in myself, basically. And so the way to avoid it is to buy for yourself gold and white linen and depend on the Lord.
It's interesting that our founding fathers in America worked hard to avoid a democracy. They understood democracies are inherently unstable because it isn't long before the public realizes they can enrich themselves at the public trough. So they worked hard to avoid a democracy. And we've perverted that around today, where we are proponents of democracies. We shouldn't be. We should be smarter than that. We're embracing the very thing that our founding fathers worked to avoid. That's exactly what we see in this country. When it's democratic, it becomes the pawn of the mob.
Yes, absolutely. Dawn asks, I have been following your study of Isaiah. In chapter 13, you talk a little about Saddam Hussein and the rebuilding of Baghdad. What do you think about that now? So the rebuilding of the actual city of Baghdad, is that still...
I don't equate Babylon with Baghdad. That's
correct.
Part of the problem he's got here.
Yes.
And there's
so
he's
probably meaning Babylon. He probably means Babylon, because I remember your study.
Well, that's my point, that people get those confused. And because Babylon and Baghdad are about 30 miles apart from each other. Babylon is Babylon, either idiomatically as well as geographically.
So the significance of Babylon then, is it important to rebuild it?
Not for us, but will it be rebuilt? Yeah, apparently so.
And there's prophetic indications that says there'll be a literal city of the rebuilding of Babylon.
I believe so.
Yes. In fact, you're the owner of an interesting artifact from the city of Babylon. One of the Marines actually brought you back an ancient brick with
one of the bricks, yeah, exactly.
With the impression of Nebuchadnezzar on it.
Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, because he wanted his name on it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We're coming to the end of our hour. Chuck, we've got lots more that we can go to. We'll pick up on those next week. It's been good. Again, I encourage those of you that want to join us.
Let me add an encouragement.
Yeah.
They should try to understand who Jesus really is. And the best way to do that is to read his book, I, Jesus, which is entirely put together from just statements he made.
Yes.
And I'm indebted to William Welty for really pulling the laboring oar on that project. We did it together. But I continue to be amazed at how many Christians discover that they don't really know who Jesus really is.
Right.
I challenge you there.
Yes, and I challenge you that if you haven't been through our 24 sessions of the 12 in the Old Testament, 12 in the New Testament, and you'd like to be part of that group that will kick off on September 4th of this year, I encourage you to go to the website kigroup.info and enter the small group code RonMatt 081616SG, and that will give you the special discount to become a part of that group. And hope that you'll join us there. And until next week, may God bless you as you continue to study his word. God bless.